Parents, the following program is intended for people over the age of 13. If your kids are younger than that, please use the YouTube Kids app.
Welcome to Scary Stories, the channel that tells you scary stories.
Peter Bernard's Scary Stories for Adults.
Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. I'm your old pal, Bigfoot. I'm not even going to kid around with you guys. We got two very long stories for you this time. But I would be remiss if I did not point out that this episode is executive produced by Braden Russell. Braden Russell's never afraid of a tussle because Braden Russell brings a lot of muscle. Thank you, Braden Russell. We couldn't do this show without you and cool people like you. And if any of the rest of you would like to try and be as cool as Braden Russell and become an executive producer of Scary Stories yourself, you can just do what he did and click the join button under this video. Or you can become a paid subscriber at peterbernard.com. In either case, you get access to over 9 hours of secret, uncensored, scary stories, unavailable anywhere else. Thanks again, Braden. Now let's get to today's episode. This first story was sent in just a couple of days ago, but it's about something that happened in the early 70s. Let's jump right into it. It's called Limping Away from the Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I once saw something that I guess could very well have been the Dogman. This was in 1971 or 72. I spent 4 summers in a row back then with my Uncle Johnny, who was a former Marine. He was a good guy, but he would also sort of put me through boot camp in the mornings the entire time. I was a good soldier, so he gave me more free time and fun things than my parents ever did. The thing was, I wasn't allowed to tell them those parts. Just tell them about the discipline and how hard I am on you in the mornings, he'd tell me. But never boast about your freedom if you want to keep it. It was a weird way to phrase it, but basically he taught me to keep my happinesses quiet so that nobody would want to take them away from me. There are those who would take your happiness away out of jealousy or spite, but there are also those who would do it thinking they're helping you. Some people are born working for the fun police, and they want to limit or eliminate fun because with fun comes abandon, and with abandon sometimes comes an accident. Go too far and you can get hurt. Have too much freedom and you might ingest the wrong thing, or you might wander too far into the woods that the Dogman lives inside of. That's what I did. The second one. It changed my life. I was a good student, not an A student, but I was a B+ student. I was pretty well adjusted, and I had a normal amount of friends. After I saw the thing I saw, though, I haven't ever been the same person since. For one thing, they say I speak and write in run-on sentences. I say my sentences are beautiful little word trees with more branches than boring people put in theirs. If not caring what your annoying, dull-witted therapist thinks means you're insane, then feel free to call me crazy. People these days are so frightened, they've confused freedom with insanity. So let me get to the part you want me to tell you about before you come for me with pitchforks and torches. I wandered into the woods behind Uncle Johnny's house during my free time that afternoon. I just wanted to see how far I could walk in the time allotted, and how good I was at getting back in the dark. I was sort of mentally playing that I was on a military practice maneuver of my own design. I figured out what half of the time I had left was, then resolved to turn around and try to come home at that time and no sooner. I was to ignore any path and only take the most difficult route through trees and bushes. I wanted to make sure that on that day I would have literally gone where no man had gone before. I wanted to be off-road for a while. Living with an ex-Marine can make you think you're a Marine too. And that's why the fun police will tisk you when you do dumb things like what I did that day. So of course it was getting pretty dark in that forest as I made my way back. I had 15 minutes left to get back or I would be late for dinner. That would be a breach of my agreement with Uncle Johnny and would at the very least mean a lessening of one privilege or another. I really wanted to get back on time, but I still did not have the house in sight or see anything in those woods that I recognized. I no longer was even trying to keep off pathways. I just wasn't finding any to walk on. I was definitely beginning to get a little frightened that I might have gotten myself lost when, in my self-pity, I neglected to watch where I was stepping. My foot slipped off a rounded rock, and I hurt my right heel pretty badly. I didn't think it was anything too serious, but it sure hurt in that moment. I tried to remember the things Uncle Johnny had told me about coping with pain, accepting the pain, however it went. Wow, that was a searing kind of a hurt, and it was very tender. It hurt to step on it, but it also hurt to walk on tiptoe. I limped along for a while, making all sorts of sounds expressing how painful this all was. In the forest, especially at night, you really don't want to draw a lot of attention to your injuries. You don't want to appear as though you're hampered in any way, because it only makes you more attractive as potential prey to one of your larger carnivorous predators. And that's exactly what I did. I drew attention to myself as possible prey to the largest land predator I've ever set my eyes on. I don't just mean up to that time. I mean, this was the largest land predator I hope I ever see. So what did I see? Well, I didn't call him Dogman at that time, I'll tell you that. I called him the mammalian alligator. And I don't care if you laugh at that. It had a long, wide, flat snout, and it was lined with snaggly teeth just like an alligator. But the thing was all furry instead of scaly, and instead of crawling around on its belly or swimming in the water, this one took it upon himself to walk around in the forests of North America, hunting for its food. It was hairy all over, and it did have legs, like the hind legs of a dog. I did make note of that at the time. I didn't really think of them as dog legs back then, though. I guess I just thought of them as monster legs. But the most memorable thing about him was that his snout was just so wide and flat and long, just like an alligator that grew fur and decided to go live up on land. Now, the first thing I saw of the creature was not its snout, though. Now that I think about it, I guess I heard the animal first. I had stumbled because of my hurt heel and grabbed onto a tree trunk with my right hand to steady myself and prevent falling into some bushes. As I did this, I heard a growling sound from behind that tree, and I backed up quickly. It's remarkable how much less tender that heel became once I heard something big giving off that deep growl. As I stepped backward, I saw the eyes shine in those bushes, and I was just stunned. I had expected cat eyes, but I couldn't tell what kind of animal this one was. Since a dog was the last thing I was expecting, I was mystified as to what I was seeing. After I had backed away, the creature walked right out of those bushes after me. It walked like a man, and looked more like a man in a furry alligator costume than any creature I'd ever seen before. But it was not a human. The legs were too different from ours. It was so much taller than I was, it's hard to estimate size in retrospect. It was taller than my Uncle Johnny, I'm certain of that. I had to crane my head back a little to look up at its big teeth as it came out of that foliage. So I kept walking backward, and he kept walking forward. It was like the O.J. Simpson slow speed chase. I think he was trying to decide if I was worth the trouble. I tried not to let my limp become apparent, and I tried to make myself as tall as I could. Then, I kept stepping backward, and the tall, dark-haired, bright-eyed alligator dog kept stepping forward. My heart was beating so hard, I thought it was going to kill me before the dog-headed monster could. I heard my name being called and turned in that direction. It was my Uncle Johnny calling for me. I couldn't see him, but I recognized his voice and instinctively called back. The alligator-snouted Dogman heard the adult voice and recognized that someone from my tribe was coming to rescue me. That was enough for him to decide I wasn't going to be worth the effort, and he retreated so quickly that it was absolutely breathtaking. I never saw anything move so quickly, especially not through such dense vegetation. Whatever that animal actually was, it was perfectly suited to its environment. I don't see how such a thing could be hunted, except by the military possibly. It moves too quickly through terrain that's far too impassable for ordinary men. I could feel the world spinning, and I was crying. What I mean is that tears were coming out of my eyes uncontrollably. I was not making crying noises. I knew how much trouble I would get in if I gave in and cried. It took all my strength to speak normally, but I reported everything that had happened to me to my uncle. He seemed pretty interested. He looked like he was trying not to seem shocked, but failing. Uncle Johnny had the best poker face of his generation. He had never seen what I saw, he admitted, but he had wondered about some of the howls out in those woods. He made new rules about being out of the forest 1 full hour before sundown on any day, and then we washed up for dinner. I didn't get punished for it, but it changed me. I found it harder and harder to do my uncle's morning drills. I found it harder to concentrate, and soon the only thing I wanted to do was watch TV or sleep. When I would go outside, it would seem like too much stimulation. I began to keep my room dark all day and stay inside whenever possible. I would jump at loud sounds like a cat, and I still have a problem where I think I can see someone creeping up behind me, but when I turn around, nobody's there, at least so far. My uncle began to punish me as though I were misbehaving instead of messed up in the head. My last summer there was torture for both of us. He told me I would never amount to anything, and I went and spent my early adulthood trying to prove him right. And then the rest of my adulthood, and my middle age, and now my old age. My last serious girlfriend decades ago told me I haven't taken charge in my adult life because I have chosen to be a failure or a coward or something. She says I use this made-up story about a mammal with an alligator mouth chasing me through the woods to excuse me from adulthood. She insisted these were all conscious choices by me and not trauma. Choice, not trauma, was how she put it. Since this incident had happened in my youth, though, life was a lot harder for me in school and socially. I lost a lot of my confidence and became overly nervous and paranoid. I didn't fit in so well any longer, but I always tried my hardest and did the best I could, hoping that if I just kept trying to be a regular guy and a good guy, that eventually the nerves and trauma might go away and it might become like it never happened. But after seeing someone I loved more than I'd ever loved anyone scream in my face that I'd chosen to be like this, and that in doing so I'd let her down and been a bad boyfriend, so she was going to leave me for someone who wasn't so selfish and childish and self-destructive, someone who would think of her in the ways I had failed to. After seeing and hearing that, and after watching her walk out of my life, everything is different. I don't try to get better anymore because I know I'm a creep and I caused that girl to leave me. She was right. I was blaming the Dogman, but I was the only monster in the story. The Dogman found me because of an injured heel. That's all I've ever been in life, an injured heel. I think I should go live in the forest. My uncle's been gone for years. There's nobody to come protect me or rescue me any longer. And if that Dogman wants to come and take me, maybe I should give him a second chance. Maybe out there in that forest is where I'm supposed to be anyhow. Out there. The next time I think something is creeping up behind me, maybe I'll turn around and get my second chance to be limping away from the Dogman. The TV antenna attracts werewolves. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I was listening to one of your stories of recent werewolf sightings, or Dogman, as you seem to enjoy calling them. It reminded me of a story, or really a few stories, from when I was much younger. This all took place before cable TV, or at least before the end of broadcast television. Back in those days, you had to erect bizarre, avant-garde metallic sculptures on your rooftop, and these magic sculptures would pull the television out of the air itself. It worked in varying degrees, based mainly on the proximity of your metal artwork to the broadcast antenna. It might work really well some of the time, on at least some of the channels, barring rain, in which all bets were off. Just as weather was known to affect the broadcast picture and sound on your TV in those days, those of us who lived on the outskirts of human culture developed our own theories about what else affected the TV reception and what the TV reception might have in turn influenced. For instance, my Auntie Dee was of the firm opinion that running your television after the sun went down attracted werewolves. It wasn't the television itself that would attract them, according to her theory, and I'm sure it wouldn't work with cable. It was the antenna, the receiving antenna, that somehow seemed to agitate and attract werewolves, according to Auntie Dee. When we were at her house, even though her closest neighbor was all the way down the block, we all had to speak very quietly after dark, and the TV had to be turned off. Loud talk and TV sets both attracted werewolves, and our auntie preferred to live at peace with them. I can't imagine anyone would want a war with the werewolves, after all. Nobody thought it odd that Auntie wanted peace instead of war. It was, however, thought of as odd that she wanted peace from werewolves. Our family was accepting, though. They all just made note that Dee now believed in werewolves and went on living their lives. Some of them found it annoying, but it wasn't like today. Nobody canceled Dee because of her belief in werewolves or anything. Those were far more accepting and free times than your generation may ever get to see. People respected each other, even if they voted differently in those days. We still had hope for the future, because hatred wasn't yet seen as the virtue it's seen as today. Why, you can't even get a good job if you don't hate the right people loudly enough these days. I don't envy your generation. I think mine was incredibly lucky, and we're probably lucky to be checking out soon, too. Well, when the fire took our parents from us, my younger sister and I were left in the care of Auntie Dee. Crazy Auntie Dee, in her 60s, raising two teenagers in the late 60s. The no TV after dark rule was set hard and strong, enforced by her actually rolling the two televisions in the house out to the garage at dusk and locking them inside. She slept with that garage key around her neck. One weekend, when there was a movie on that both my sister and I wanted to watch, we snuck into Auntie's room and thought about trying to snatch the key from her throat. Neither of us could get past the idea of getting caught, with our hands at our old auntie's bosom, though, and we were never able to watch television there, period. Until Auntie's friend the next state over passed on. She went to stay overnight somewhere to attend the funeral. We were left with a babysitter who was literally 2 years older than we were. She was left a ring of keys, and the three of us took those keys out to the garage to test them all and see if any would unlock the TV sets. We were only interested in the color set. We had absolutely no entertainment in that house, and the idea of a color television to us that evening would be about the equivalent of getting virtual reality installed in your den or something these days. They still made some theatrical features in black and white back then, so to us, color was a real luxury, like a shag rug. Eventually, our villainy paid off, and we had secured the release of the aforementioned color television set and placed it on a pedestal to be worshipped inside the house. I remember we popped Jiffy Pop popcorn on the stove and sat on the floor before the great god television, who presented us with a very spooky film. It wasn't about werewolves, but it was genuinely creepy. Every time you would see fog in this film, you would know scary stuff was going on, or it would be soon. When I got up to go to the bathroom at one point, I was very surprised to see outside the window that it had become foggy all around the grounds outside. Besides morning mist, I had never seen anything like that in that area. I had been laughing as I got up to go to the bathroom, but all of a sudden, I became frightened to be putting so much space between myself and the two girls. I was genuinely scared, and I knew even then how irrational a feeling that was. Fog is an atmospheric phenomenon that's not gonna hurt you. I went and did my business, but I was quick about it, wanting to rejoin the others as soon as possible. On my way back, I paused to note how thick the fog was getting and how hard it had become to see into the woods surrounding the house. I could only see 2 or 3 rows deep. If it got any thicker, we might not see the trees at all. I pointed that out to my sister and the babysitter, who got more frightened even than I had. Christopher Lee was on TV playing some kind of evil cult leader, turning people into zombies or something. I remember if the shadow of the cross hit the zombies, they would burst into flames. It made no sense, but all three of us were gripped with complete fear from what we were watching and where we were watching it. As the movie came to an end, with I think only 2 of the cast surviving a ghastly, flaming zombie demise, we heard a wolf howling very loud. My sister told me to turn the TV down, it was too loud. I did, but that howling finished, maintaining the volume it chose to maintain. Both girls leaped to their feet. I was not as smart as they were in those days, or I was slow on the uptake or something, because I have to admit that I was in no way scared of the howling sound outside. I just figured it was a dog, or at worst a coyote or a wolf, who cares? It was outside and we were inside. I hadn't connected the howling sound with Auntie's werewolves yet, but both girls had. I guess I never really believed it could possibly be a real thing. The girls ran upstairs and told me to turn the TV off. I laughed at them, all scared because a neighborhood dog went woof. I felt so much brighter than them. I felt so much braver. I walked toward the kitchen to get myself a snack. As I did so, something slapped onto one of the house windows and looked directly in at me. I mean, it slapped both palms to the glass, its face between its chest and belly slapping to the glass window as well, all at once. I saw, lit by the flickering TV light, a hairy, or really furry, dog-like humanoid. There was no mistaking it for either a normal dog or a normal human. This was some sort of sick and distorted combination of the two. It looked mutated and wrong, but it looked strong and healthy in the same measure. The teeth were so thick and so long they were almost like small tusks, but they were inside the mouth and so must have been meant for chewing or biting. It was a dark color, black in places and very dark dull gray in others. The eyes looked inhuman and demonic, not dog-like, not sympathetic. I saw no soul in there looking back at me. Screaming, I turned and ran upstairs after the girls who I no longer felt so much smarter than. The three of us stayed locked in one of the bedrooms for hours, listening to the Dogman howling. My sister was crying, saying she didn't understand why the werewolf wouldn't go away, especially since I had turned off the TV so long ago. I looked at her funny. Me? I didn't turn the TV off. Both of them got pretty angry at me at once. I was only asked to do one thing and I had forgotten to do it. They both really believed that was a werewolf outside, and they both really believed that the TV reception was what was attracting it. All that nonsense that my Auntie Dee believed in. But everyone knew she was batty, so I figured that all that stuff that was going on must be some kind of a coincidence. After all, that creature couldn't be a werewolf. It didn't look anything like a werewolf. It wasn't even wearing a shirt and pants like all the werewolves I had seen in the movies did. This guy looked like a combination of a dog and a man. It didn't look like I started to think about it. Dogs are a lot like wolves. Maybe if this thing wasn't a wolf man, possibly it might be a dog man? A chill went through me and I shuddered uncontrollably. This thing was my auntie's werewolf. He actually had been attracted by the use of the antenna. He actually existed. He didn't look anything like I had imagined he would look, but this had to be the creature that my auntie had always been so scared of. And now, both the girls were insisting I go downstairs and turn that TV set off. There was a huge argument. I suggested we leave it on and just spend the night upstairs. They said the werewolf was going to break in and eat us all if someone didn't turn off the TV set. I argued that the babysitter was technically the oldest of us, plus she had been placed in charge. Finally, we decided to walk downstairs together. We each grabbed something we thought we could defend ourselves with. I had a tennis racket. Not a good one, a plastic kid's tennis racket with broken netting. We went downstairs in age order, with the babysitter in front and me in the middle. It was quiet down there, and we walked as silently as we could manage. Looking out the windows revealed no information, as the fog had gotten so unbelievably thick. The babysitter tiptoed over to the TV and leaned down to turn it off, when my sister, stepping off the final step of the staircase, made a loud creaking noise. Suddenly, out of the fog emerged the huge, hairy, dog-headed man. He slapped his body up against that window again and began making a desperate and angry sound. I remember screaming, moving my sister out of my way, and running upstairs. When I got there, I noticed that neither of the girls were behind me, and I feared the worst. Listening, I couldn't hear anything from downstairs at all. I hadn't heard glass breaking, but that might have been because of the screaming I was doing as I ran back up. When I got up the nerve to look downstairs, I saw the girls were playing a board game on the floor. Walking down to them, I also noticed that the night outside had cleared up. The fog was gone just like that. It turns out that when the babysitter turned the TV off, the Dogman or whatever it was just vanished. I still think it must have stepped back into the fog, but both of them insisted it vanished. The fog had taken a little longer to clear up than that. In fact, they hadn't noticed it was clear until I pointed it out to them. I still have no real explanation for what happened that night, but I know we never watched TV in that house after dark ever again. Maybe I would watch cable or streaming in there if the house were still in my family, but it is not. We never risked it again because TV antennas attract the Dogman.
I shall return. Like last night's triple lupa, I shall return. I'll be back here May 23rd to help host our Memorial Day Military Dogman stories. All stories alleged to have happened to military service people or veterans. I'm gonna read one of the stories myself. You won't want to miss it. It should prove to be quite memorial.
And now, get ready for an all-new, completely uncensored, slightly bloody, and absolutely terrifying new Dogman story. Oh, wait. YouTube won't allow me to tell you stories like that on this channel. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to peterbernard.com and sign up for our paid subscribers club. You can choose any price you can afford for a 1-month subscription, and then every weekend, we tell you a story YouTube would never allow us to tell you on this channel. See you this Sunday for an all-new, very scary, completely uncensored Dogman story.
Come back for more scary stories.